Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Before we get started, I want to remind you to check out our latest Movie Verdicts episode, in which Robert Callahan and I dive deep into the troubling and brilliant 1996 classic Primal Fear with Richard Gere and Edward Norton. That is in your feed right now, so go check it out. Also, a quick update that we are currently looking for construction lawyers in Dallas, estate planning lawyers in Austin and Houston, and high-end business litigators in Dallas and Houston. So if you or someone you know might be interested, please reach out to me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. All right, today we are in Dallas, where our guest is Gwen Walraven. And Gwen is a litigator and partner at Bell Nunnally Martin, a full-service firm that has grown to over 60 attorneys with no end in sight. Gwen's trial practice concentrates on the representation of businesses and individuals in business disputes involving claims like breach of contract, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, tortious interference, and intellectual property claims. She is a 3-time Texas Rising Star and a Texas Bar Foundation Fellow. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Gwen Walraven on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Gwen Walraven joins us right now. Gwen, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Well, it's great to see you and great to reconnect here. I want to start by having you share with us a little bit about your firm and your practice. Obviously, you are a partner at Bell Nunnally, as we said in the intro. Tell us what's going on and catch us up.
All right. Thanks, Daniel. I'm, as Daniel said, I'm a partner at Bell Nunnally Martin. I'm here in Dallas, Texas. I cannot say enough good things about Bell Nunnally. I came straight out of law school, and I've been at the firm ever since. So I grew up as a junior associate, and I'm now a partner. I am a general commercial litigator. That means that I do a little bit of everything. At our firm, we have the ability to specialize if you want to. So I have a couple of areas that I dabble in a little more than others. Do a lot of creditors' rights stuff. I ended up doing, oddly enough, some probate work, which when I was in law school was kind of my ultimate goal, but it just really hadn't happened until pretty far along in my career. I also do business divorces, which are about as close to family law as I'll get, that and probate. The firm as a whole, though, our goal is to be able to provide 90 to 95% of all services, legal services that businesses could need. And so we've got a transactional section as well as the litigation side of things. So we really aim to kind of almost be a one-stop shop.
Yeah, well, and as you know, over the time that we've been working together, whatever it's been, 9 years or 10 now, you guys have just exploded, it seems like. And so we're just really excited for you and your firm. We're recording here on January 28th, and I always like to say that for context before asking you about what's going on with COVID, because it can change so much just depending on what's going on. But tell us about how COVID right now is impacting your firm, your practice, how you guys are operating and all of that. Share us a little bit about the COVID normal for you guys now at Bell Nunnally.
Well, it's pretty interesting because Bell Nunnally has kind of been on the forefront of being back in the office, open law firm really since May of 2020. Now, it's not been mandated, it's not been required, but we have a lot of lawyers who prefer to practice in their offices. I know that your listeners can't see, but I am still remote. I'm at my home office, and that is supported by the firm. as of right now, January 28th, because we're at 50% because of the governor's rollbacks after the hospitalization rate got where it was. So I'd say we have about 50% of folks coming back in. And I could spend forever talking about COVID, but I'll highlight this and say from a firm being open standpoint, we have all the normal protocols in place. There's plexiglass now, so interaction with legal assistants are very protected. All kinds of safety protocols in terms of what you're supposed to do upon arrival, temperature checks, and the like. From how COVID has impacted the practice side of things, really, we're getting lots of questions from clients about that very thing, and that is opening back up. How do we do it? How do we meet the needs of our employees? How do we keep a safe environment? So our employment folks are fielding calls on that, I'd say, daily basis on how we do that. I taught a webinar on it back in May to some small business owners in Richardson, Texas, where I live, just kind of a list of ideals, what we think you should do. Yep. And of course, as with everything, it's morphed over time.
Yeah.
From a practice standpoint, anytime you see an economic downturn of any sort, and we saw this back in 2007 and 2008, leases, breach of lease agreements, things like that are on the rise. We've also seen, though, of course, and I don't think we've seen the full start of this, by no means the middle or even the end of litigation that we're going to see come up with force majeure clauses and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just the nature of the beast. But I will say, amid all of this, the firm as a whole has stayed busy, and we actually brought on 5 new lawyers during the entire pandemic. So
that's so great. And how about the Dallas County courthouses and kind of what hearings and anything like that looks like right now?
So for the most part, everything I've done has been 100% remote, virtual. And it's everything from a WebEx platform to a Zoom platform, depending on your county. Yep. And of course, I do have preferences and whatnot. And I heard a funny story, if I could share briefly.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my partners yesterday, we were interviewing a candidate, and he'd had a hearing. It was out of Pennsylvania, so it's not direct to your question in Dallas. But the judge spent the entire hearing with his video turned off. So as if it's not weird enough to try to interact with the court on a computer, you're looking at a black box with like Judge so-and-so in it.
Right.
So it's bizarre to hear that story. I will say, I think that there is a time and a place for remote hearings, and they're going to be around for some time. And I don't think they're all bad. I wouldn't want to try a case that way. There's certain hearings I wouldn't want to do that way.
Right.
But if your technology is holding up, it offers opportunities, I think, actually, to let younger lawyers get more involved, because you can have a supervising partner zoom in, if you will, without the added extra expense of traveling to the courthouse. And, you're just dealing with literally a finite amount of time when judge says go, because otherwise you can be working and billing to other matters. So there's an efficiency that allows, I think, multiple lawyers to be there for supervising and training. Yeah. Additionally, I had a hearing on it was a small issue, something about, I think I was trying to get a default entered, and very rare that a court ever requires a hearing, but it was a small county, beginning of COVID. So everybody was very, hesitant to enter default judgments. And the judge kind of put me to task and said, look, I need X, Y, and Z from you. To all due respect, Your Honor, I've never had a judge ask for that. But I'll do whatever the court wants, of course. And she was so funny. She's like, well, I'm going to need you to amend. And I'm thinking, dollars, right? This is not a big case, and it's going to cost all this money. I said, Your Honor, can I just share my screen and show you my file for the information you're asking for? She said, absolutely. She swore me in. I testified to it. She's looking at, of course, not confidential information on my system, but saved the client a ton of money. So
wow.
I think the virtual world's been kind of good.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like as we've had conversations like this for the last 6 or 8 months, that seems to be the general consensus, is that for especially things that are maybe not contested, that are just sort of more formality, but you just normally would have to be down there at the courthouse and take the time to get there and all of that. But there's no dispute, there's no disagreement, all that stuff. Those types of things, it seems like, are going to, in some way or form, continue online, at least in a lot of courthouses, a lot of counties around the state, because there have been those efficiencies that you just talked about. So I'm hopeful for that. And that could be good for the lawyers, like you said. It could be good for the clients, save money, all of that. So that's interesting and it's exciting. So and you mentioned you have a fairly broad practice and get to dabble in a lot of things, and you highlighted a couple creditors' rights and probate that are more specifically what you've spent more time on lately. Are there things within either of those areas, or anything more broadly, that you have seen either in sort of trends or issues that are cropping up in those specific areas, or maybe new legislation or things that are impacting those areas that you've been working in more recently? Kind of what's the state of the CLE stuff around what areas you practiced in?
Well, I don't think probate's changed a lot for obvious reasons. I don't know that there's really been that much going on differently. I think that where I've seen it in my particular practice has been, I'll get a judgment, and if I want to domesticate it out of state so I can, execute on assets, depending on what state you're trying to go to, there's certain moratoriums in place and protections because of what's going on in the current, state of affairs with COVID. Locally, I'm embarrassed to admit I don't even know where the law stands on this at this exact moment in time, because I feel like it's almost a moving target. The foreclosure aspect of things has been altered.
Yeah, right.
But this is not exactly answering your question. I almost feel like I need to apologize to the court, but where I've seen really the most impact in my particular practice is the debt side of things going up. Like I said before, the breach of the leases, and somebody in an area you didn't hear me mention earlier, because frankly, up until now, I'd kind of run from it, is I've ended up on the creditor side dabbling in bankruptcy court.
Oh, yeah.
Bankruptcy's got a lot of activity right now.
Of course.
And you want to talk about the wild, wild west. I mean, I always thought state court was where the real fun stuff happened. No, it's bankruptcy court. It's a wild ride.
Oh, man. Well, transitioning, I wanted to ask you about when you first got started in practice, and anything that maybe one or two things that you learned as a new lawyer in those first couple of years, maybe from a mentor or someone you worked alongside or worked for, or anything like that, that has stuck with you and is an important part of who you are now still as a lawyer?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. So I would say probably the best advice I ever got, and I still do it to this day, and I try to teach all the associates I work with to do it as well. And that is, they call law the practice of law for a reason. And you don't come out of law school knowing it all. And to the extent you think you're going to know it all in 5 or 6 years, you just don't. Right. It's always evolving. It's changing, like what you and I discussed kind of at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
And even if you are, say you're an excellent technical lawyer and you've got procedure just down to the T, there's going to come a time in your career, whether it's your first year, second year, or sometime in that span, that you're going to make a mistake. Right. You're going to mess something up with the court. You're going to mess up some research for a partner, whatever it is. Yeah. And you're going to have this moment where you figure it out and your stomach sinks and you just go, what do I do? Yeah. And here's what you do. You don't hide it. You don't bury it. Yep. You come up with a plan. Here's how I intend to fix this. Right. And then the partner who told me, or senior associate at the time, said, and then you do not pass go, you do not collect $200, and you go directly to that partner's office and you say, look, this happened. It was a mistake. Here's how I propose we fix it. Yep. And present a plan. Because the worst thing you can do is bury your head in the sand. It's not going away. Right. Or try to fix it and mess that up too, Right. And that goes hand in hand with another piece of advice I also got in that first couple of years from a different person, but it said there's very few things in law that you cannot unmess up. Unless you blow the statute of limitations. That one's a little trickier. Yeah. But other than that, most things you can fix. So, don't be, you don't intend to make mistakes, but they will happen. Yeah. And I've been doing this 16 years and I'll still have that moment where I'm like, oh, yeah. Or my personal favorite is, they changed the rules of civil procedure and I missed that CLE. And, right. You all of a sudden realize, I was supposed to have this language in my petition or I can't conduct discovery. Yeah. Yeah. It happens.
Yeah. Wow, that's both of those are awesome, and I think encouraging, because I think people need to hear that, and I mean, I think they know it, but I need to really hear that they are going to make mistakes, and it's okay, but it's how you handle those as you move forward that are the most important things about. It's not making the mistake, because that's just not practical. That's not possible. And so awesome.
Yeah. No one's perfect.
Yeah. Right. Right. And so you've talked about a little bit already today, having, now that you've been a partner at Bell Nunnally for a while, and had young lawyers that have worked for you and worked within the firm. What's something that stands out about a young lawyer that impresses you when you see young lawyers come through there? What are some traits, or what are some things they do that cause you to take notice and think that they're on the right track and made a good decision here? They're going to do good things here.
I love enthusiasm. Enthusiasm and a desire to really learn and practice law.
Yeah.
I would be being disingenuous to our conversation, as well as to anyone listening, if I said that the practice of law was always easy. It's not popular to sit there and say that this is going to be rigorous, and sometimes it's going to take your nights and weekends, but that's the reality,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
A lot of times your clients are demanding, the court's demanding, there's a flurry of filings, but I want to practice law with people who genuinely want to practice law.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be in the trenches with these folks, I want them to want to be there.
Yeah.
And so I love it when associates are enthusiastic. And now that's not to downplay the technical side of stuff.
Sure.
I also want a lawyer that is so dedicated getting the right answer, that they're thorough, their work quality is good, they're an excellent technical lawyer. But then those are the people that when you're going to trial or you're ramping up for a big summary judgment briefing, they're your teammates.
Yeah.
And so those are the qualities I look for.
I wanted to make sure I followed up on the enthusiasm piece, because I actually do think that for a lot of lawyers who don't have what they would maybe consider to be an outgoing personality, or kind of more of an externally tight, how would someone who's sort of like the more reserved, quiet type demonstrate that enthusiasm? Because I think that type of person looks around and sees people being, in their minds, like enthusiastic in the way that they are talkative, or asking, lots of questions with a lot of energy, maybe, and that kind of thing. But that's not everyone's personality. So, but I'm sure that's not preventing anyone from showing enthusiasm if they have like a more low key or understated personality. So, what would you say maybe to someone like that, who's sort of more of a quieter type, an introvert type, how they can demonstrate that same enthusiasm that you're talking about?
Great question. And I'm glad you followed up on it, because in no way am I trying to suggest that it's only kind of that outward, what your personality is. And especially to the extent, there's a transactional or a corporate lawyer who, by nature is not going to, be as, I don't know the word for it, like you said, more extroverted.
Are you saying the corporate lawyers aren't the fun ones, Gwen? Are you?
Hey, I have some great friends that are corporate lawyers, and but I also, inside joke here, Daniel knows I've been doing the recruiting side of things for 7 and 8 years now, so I've interviewed a lot of corporate lawyers, I've interviewed a lot of, litigation, and,
that's funny.
There are some differences in personalities, but, I work with a lot of our corporate lawyers as well, and how they demonstrate it to me, and even introverted litigators do exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the follow-up in emails. It's the not waiting for me to necessarily say, hey, we've done A, now do B and C. That enthusiasm can come across in as simple as an email that says, hey, say I've sent an email to an associate saying, you've worked with this client before, why don't you go ahead and prepare a demand letter, run the normal traps, send it back to me and I'll review it. And they respond back with, hey, will do. Also, I'm going to go ahead and start putting the bones together on the petition so we can be ready to get that out the door. That's obviously on the plaintiff's side. We do defense work as well. But, that shows me right there, that's an enthusiasm that has nothing to do with whether you're standing in the door of my office, or we're on the phone. It's as simple as just showing me that you're not only going to do what I asked you to do, but you're going to think 2 or 3 steps ahead.
Yeah. Awesome. Perfect. Well, thanks for that. What about on the opposite end of the spectrum? What are some either pet peeves or just some things that you see in young associates that are bad habits or things they need to break, or you have to break them up when they come to you? What about anything like that?
Right. It's funny. It's actually the polar opposite of what I just said. And that is ghosting on email is a bad plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sends a signal, it may send a signal that you're really busy, but even if it is sending a signal you're really busy, it's sending that signal that says, I'm busy with other people's stuff, so you're not as important.
Right.
And then I don't have a warm and fuzzy that I don't need to micromanage every step thereafter to make sure it happens. Yeah. So I appreciate if I get, even hey, I'm in a mediation all day, I'm on this though. Yeah. But to not even respond until the next day, then I'm like, well, okay, I'm in a lurch now. Or I've had the client ask, can I get this turned around by X date? So that is probably my biggest pet peeve. Yeah. And I'll say this, and one of my partners who was actually a senior associate back when I started, this is kind of the counter of that. He thinks that the best associates in the world are the ones that when he wakes up in the middle of the night because he's thinking about something on a case, he thinks, oh, that associate is working on it. I can go right back to sleep. So if I'm waking up in the middle of the night and I think, oh gosh, I sent out 3 emails right before I had to log off and go to this meeting, but I never heard back. And then I'm up for the next hour. Yeah. That's no bueno.
No. Yeah. And specifically the email thing is interesting. One of the things that the last year or two that I was in the career development office, we started really noticing and talking about was, and I want our audience to really hear this because I think this is important in terms of just the mode of communication and the transition we've been going through over the course of the last decade and a half through text messaging, through chats, through all of that, through even like using social media chat options to talk to one another, especially for people that are in their 20s and 30s. That email we found, and I've seen this still, has become sort of a not the primary mode of electronic communication for a lot of people, and so therefore like they don't tend to check it as often. We would find this a lot within the law school stuff. Is we'd go 2 days. I don't check my email every day, or whatever. But they would have their phone and they would check their texts obviously all the time. And so when they get into the interview process with law firms, or then therefore as a summer clerk or as an associate, where email is a primary, or if not the primary mode of communication, and checking your email regularly, if not hourly, is expected. And we can whole side conversation on how to manage your email, because that's a whole other organizational issue that's separate. But I think the managing and responding to and reading email on a regular basis as a lawyer right now is still something you have to do, and you can't just wait for texts or chats from somewhere or whatever else, right? And so we saw that a lot, and we really started having to talk about it a lot. Make sure people were checking their email more than once every few days.
It's so funny that you bring this up, because it is something that I think is an issue. I think, in all fairness, once students do get to law firms, they are a little more diligent about checking their email as opposed to every couple of days. But I appreciate the humor there. But what I have found is that sometimes the text communication is the best bet, and literally the partners in our firm are kind of being retrained by the associates. Yeah. In terms of needing to sometimes ping with a text to say, hey, I just sent you an email that needs immediate attention, or something like that. Yes. Yeah. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't like and I keep looking at my phone because I'm referring to it. I don't like that being the main source of communication. Right. Because what happens is we can't archive that to our system. Right. And so it becomes a technological issue. A lot of times when I'm trying to put the pieces together on something that's transpired several months ago, I'm looking at emails. Back in the day, you'd look at letters, but almost everything is an email communication now. Right. And so, I'm looking at that, and there may be this void of communications that took place via text message. So I think it can be useful in terms of pinging and reminding. And there's a gentleman I work with that our deal is, if I need him to focus on something immediately, I send the email, then I send a text. And it works like a charm. Yeah. So.
Absolutely. And I know that some firms, I don't know if you all are in this camp yet, some firms started to use some of the, like the Slack type of technology or Microsoft Teams to create some of the other ways to communicate with groups that are on certain cases and files and that kind of thing, and kind of keep, try to keep the email chains a little more uncluttered or decluttered by using that kind of stuff. But it'll always change. But just the responsiveness, the attention to especially your partners that are asking you for work and asking you for updates. I mean, those are things that have to always be checked and responded to. So that's good stuff. Well, I do want to ask, you mentioned about hiring and recruiting and interviewing, and you've led that for your firm now for a while. When you go through the process of looking at resumes and deciding who you want to interview, and of course this audience is mostly people that are practicing now, so maybe a lateral type of situation. But what are you looking for on a resume? What stands out to you as things that are important to have in a prospective candidate?
So, Daniel, I'll answer it from the lateral angle because I think that's your primary audience. Yeah. And so when I get the resumes in, and you have to understand, for every open position, you're getting a lot of resumes. So that age-old advice that you got to keep it to one page, I think holds true today.
Okay.
You still go back and look at your class rank, what law school did you go to, what did you do while you were in law school. Still important, but it diminishes a little bit when you get to that 3-4 year level, especially if you've really got hands-on great experience. Yeah. So to the extent you can craft language in your resume, and oftentimes in a cover letter, which back when I was looking for a job, I couldn't stand doing cover letters, but I think they're very important.
Yeah.
And so if you can somehow, in a succinct way, really manage to highlight the real stuff you've done. And whether that's on the litigation side or whether you've done really awesome stuff on a deal that you've been a big part of a team, that's what the focus is. And then I love to see, and really am disappointed when I don't see, a hobbies section.
Oh, yeah.
That's the line.
Yeah.
I want to know you're a real person. What do you do?
Yeah.
And actually, now this is not the official Bell Nunnally policy, and I don't even know that any of the law schools would agree with me right now, but having done my fair share of a lot of resumes during COVID, I might even say I'd add COVID hobbies, because we are getting some very fascinating answers on really ingenious things that young lawyers have done to kind of occupy themselves during this time. I mean, we've heard painting and making my own beer. I'm reupholstering furniture. Just that goes into the interview and resume process. And here's why this is important. For all the reasons that I just described, the enthusiasm and really wanting to practice law with people that want to practice law, we also want to practice law with people we like.
Yes.
And so,
yes,
if you can show me on your resume and then follow it up with an interview that says you're going to be somebody that's qualified to do excellent legal work, fit in as part of our team, and be somebody that I want to get to know you and your family, and that's the person that's going to get their foot in the door and get the interview and get the call back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny, I'm laughing. I think people that listen to this show regularly know that we will have talked about in the past the interests or hobbies section on the resume a few different times. And mostly because it's actually a fairly kind of debated, thing within the career development and law firm recruiter world of whether to have that or not. And but I tend to come down on the side of having it, and particularly if you can articulate something that's somewhat unique or somewhat I don't know, a little bit more specific maybe than just something that's more broad or bland. But I think that in general it's helpful, because most of the time, and particularly when we were talking about working especially a lot with small and mid-sized firms that where, and you're, I would put in the mid to large category now, you guys have grown. But, especially within those firm sizes where it's, 8 or 10 or 12 lawyers, what that person's personality is like and all of that is going to make a huge impact on the culture of the overall firm. If it's a firm of 1,000 lawyers, one personality is not going to make as huge of an impact. And so I think it sort of goes on a scale with the size of the firm in terms of that importance of that too. But I'm glad to hear you say it, because I think that's really important. And I think for you all too, especially because you guys have such a cool and unique culture, I think, and fun. And I think you'd want that kind of mixture to make it the firm, the place you want it to be.
Yeah, it's important to me, and so I will say that it can backfire.
Oh yeah, there's risk in everything.
I hesitate to give a specific example, because I wouldn't want it to be somebody that's perhaps listening. But we've had some very cerebral hobbies that really just kind of, we were like, whoa. Yeah. So
Oh yeah, no, it can for sure. Well, good. Well, we're towards the end of our time, and but before we get into our rapid fire questions to end here, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet or covered that you would want to share?
Sure. And I think you asked me this, and maybe it was offline, but you asked me for sure, what piece of advice I got that I did use in my career, as I came up through the ranks. The question not asked, or at least I haven't answered yet, is what advice didn't I get that I wish I had gotten?
Yes.
And it's this. Start thinking about building your own practice and developing your own clients almost from day one.
Yeah.
And that means even if you're at a shop that tells you, we don't want you to develop business, we don't want you to do any of that, business development isn't always just business development. It's socializing. It's becoming involved in organizations. It's getting out there. You doing something that doesn't require you to sit behind your desk and stare at your computer. You will make contacts that will start at law firms and they will go in-house. There's just it's relationship building is the heart and soul of the practice of law. And it takes years to build that relationship to where somebody is going to trust you to handle their legal work.
Yeah.
Start early.
I'm so glad you said it. Thanks for coming back to that. Yeah. And that's good stuff. All right. So we have our rapid fire questions here to end our time. If you're ready.
I'm ready.
Let's do it. All right. Name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Enthusiasm.
Well, underline that one. What habit has been key to your success?
Hard work.
Right. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Okay, I'm such a geek when I say this. It's called Intap, and it's a timekeeping software that allows you to start and start clocks.
Oh, cool. Okay. And then, your favorite social distancing activity. We kind of hinted at this earlier for the COVID hobbies.
Mine's not that creative, though. I go play golf. It gets me out of the house.
Absolutely. Hey, golf's a great one. This is perfect for that. And then lastly, your favorite legal movie.
Okay, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I don't know if you'd really call this a legal movie, but if you start with American President, carry it forward through The West Wing, anything written by Sorkin, and most of those guys are lawyers, so it's kind of lawyer-like. Absolutely.
No, I definitely, of course, he wrote A Few Good Men, which is one of the main ones, but yes, American President's fantastic. West Wing is awesome. Aaron Sorkin's great. So, and he had a new movie come out this past year that was another one, The Trial of the Chicago 7, that was on Netflix. So yeah, Sorkin stuff's awesome. Good pick. Yeah. Well, Gwen, thank you again so much for taking the time to be with us, and thanks for being patient through the technology stuff. And we just really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Take care.
All right, my thanks again to Gwen Walraven for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me directly, Daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget to check out our deep dive into Primal Fear on our first Movie Verdicts episode of 2021. It's in your feed right now. And if you have any interest in the opportunities that we mentioned at the top of the show, or just want to talk about what other opportunities there might be out there for you, please get in touch. I would love to visit with you. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.